Very warm welcome to our 18th and last RCI pod of the year. Today, we'll talk about how to leverage big data for tourism recovery. It is the first joint knowledge event that the ADB is organizing together with the UN World Tourism Organization. We're very excited about this new partnership, and we are looking forward to a strong and productive collaboration ahead. Let me quickly turn to the topic of today's webinar. We have started to think about big data and how to utilize the big data for the tourism industry already before the COVID-19 pandemic. We realized while the private sector has moved fast in collecting and utilizing big data, the public sector has been rather slow in taking advantage of big data for policy making. Big data has a huge potential to improve tourism policy and management, especially as the pandemic has hit the tourism industry so hard and many uncertainties exist. We need to be quick on our big data, which is often available with a short time lag, very high frequency, can make an important contribution to a successful recovery of the tourism industry after COVID. Over the past months, we have collaborated with a number of experts, including those from UNWTO, to better understand the potential of big data and how to use it best for our opportunities. Today, we will present the preliminary findings of a joint ADB-UNWTO report on big data and tourism. This report will show how the public and private sector can create a win-win scenarios and use big data to maximize its full potential. It will also show how to leverage big data for the recovery from the COVID-19 pandemic. Let me stop here and introduce our very distinguished guest, Mr. Manuel Butler, Executive Director of the UN World Tourism Organization. Mr. Butler is the Executive Director of UNWTO since June 2018. Prior to joining the UNWTO, he was the CEO of Tour España twice, between 2012 and 2013 and 2016 and 2018. He was also the president of the European Travel Commission in 2013. He has been working in a management position in the public and private sector in the Western Europe as well as North and Latin America. Mr. Butler, the floor is yours.
Thank you very much, Sin John Park, Director of the RCD Asian Development Bank. Good afternoon to everyone. Good morning to a couple of us there here in Europe. It is a pleasure working alongside the ADBA. I think it's more than needed, it's a must. One of the clear lessons to be learned from the pandemic is the importance of resilience, planning, and honestly need to work on the basis of network logic. Working jointly, both institutions, ADB and UNWTO, is an excellent example. This webinar shows the importance of working together and using big data. We are living in an unprecedented change in paradigm. We know the coming 4 years will be central to build all together the future of the tourism. Tourism is leaving its childhood behind and transitioning into adulthood. Adulthood means taking responsibilities and at the same time are more complex. Tourism structure is more and more complex, specifically regarding the value chains and in business operations. More complexity means a higher need of evidence-based decisions on better understanding the potential of big data. Companies are already on the front line of issues such as already having exploiting the increasing amount of big data. The public sector needs also to use the generated big data by the tourism industry to better manage a more and more sustainable and inclusive tourism. The UNWTO recommendations for action and guidelines to restart tourism, calling for urgent and strong support to help the global tourism sector not only recover from the unprecedented challenge of the COVID-19, but to grow back better. In these recommendations, big data plays a key role, such as investing in data and in market intelligence systems to monitor behavior, anticipate trends, and adjust product design and marketing strategies. Evidence-based decisions and strategies are key, particularly in moments of crisis. Investing in data, analysis, and partnerships allow for close short-term monitoring of tourism development and impact. We have to generate data as well, setting up and growing up our network of national and local sustainable tourism observatories, the so-called INSTO network, to measure all dimensions of tourism. We are in partnership with relevant stakeholders and we share this information with the sector. Building back better requires tourists to embrace a holistic vision of sustainability, build new and better measurements, and promote changes in policy, governance, financing, travel behavior, and business models. And in this context, big data is one of the pillars for going ahead. I hope this webinar helps in the sense to build back a better tourism for the well-being of tourists and to local population alike. Thank you very much again to the Asian Development Bank giving us this opportunity to work together. Thank you very much to all. And I wish a very successful webinar. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Bertler. Let me now introduce our presenters today. First presentation will be delivered by Mr. Trevor Weltman, who's partner, Clickable Impact Consulting Group. His presentation will be about big data for better tourism policy and management. Trevor is the immediately past Chief Operating Officer of the Pacific Asia Travel Association, called PATA, where he used to oversee the day-to-day operations of the association across its 3 offices in Bangkok, Beijing, and London, and also spearheaded the creation of the PATA Crisis Resource Center. Trevor has over 10 years of experience in Asia, covering China, Vietnam, and Thailand. At present, Trevor is a partner at Clickable Impact Consulting Group, an interdisciplinary consultancy focused on the sustainable development goals. Following Trevor's presentation, our consultant, Won-hee Cho, will make a presentation on revitalizing the tourism industry through big data. She is currently the Senior Economics Research Associate of the Economic Research and the Regional Cooperation Department. She's conducting economic research on tourism. So Trevor, you have 20 minutes, and then Won-hee will provide another 10-minute presentation. So the floor is yours, Trevor.
Thank you very much, Dr. Park. I did do a run through this morning. It was 20 minutes and 10 seconds. So if I'm a touch over 20 minutes, please excuse me, it will be done quickly. So hello, everybody. Thank you for having me. I'm going to go ahead and share my screen, but I'm admittedly not a Power Teams user. I'm more of a Zoom guy. So I'm going to just try to get this set up and make sure it will work and get my notes in a line, and then we will go from there. So let me get it up and looking. Okay. Can somebody confirm, can you see my screen?
Yes, you can.
Okay, thank you, Matthias. Okay, good afternoon and good morning, ladies and gentlemen. Thank you very much for having me here. Big thank you to Dr. Park and Mr. Butler for the warm introductions and for also including PATA in this great initiative. So my name is Trevor Weltman, and today I'm here to talk about big data for better tourism, policy, management, and the sustainable recovery from COVID-19. Okay. As mentioned by Dr. Park, just want to be clear at the beginning that this is a preliminary finding. So today's presentation is based on a report that ADB and UNWTO had commissioned from PATA, that PATA had actually consulted on. So these are the preliminary findings that have not received comment yet from ADB and UNWTO, though we're quite confident in what we're presenting. With that in mind, it's a lot of information to pack into 20 minutes. The report itself is over 90 pages. So I'm actually going to try to give a high-level understanding of what is the true role of big data and digitalization in the future of tourism. And then at the end, I'm going to give some practical context for how big data is helping us. So the first part, I'm just going to quickly touch on the context and impact of COVID-19 on the industry. For the second part, I'm going to talk about this idea of how big data is going to help us create these smart destinations of the future. And for the final part, as I shared, I'm going to give some insights into the role of big data in COVID-19 recovery and the sustainable future of tourism. So before I get into the presentation, though, I do want to ask, what is our goal? Why are we even talking about tourism, or why are we even talking about big data in tourism? I think it's important to say at the beginning that what our goal is not only. Our goal for big data is not only for marketing and product development. It's not only to better leverage our online platforms and digitalization. And it's also not only for COVID-19 recovery, although it is an urgent issue that we need to pay attention to. As I'm sure many of you saw this political cartoon make its rounds on Facebook or on social media at the beginning part of the year, we have to keep in mind that the crisis facing the tourism industry is not simply about the short-term needs to revive the industry from COVID-19. We need to use COVID-19 as the springboard to help us combat climate change. You know, just as an example, if some of the sea level reports that I've seen come true over the next few years, those of us based in Bangkok, Manila, Jakarta, our livelihoods are at risk, say nothing of the tourism industries, the significant tourism industries that these destinations house. So we need to make sure that when we talk about big data in tourism, we also have that long-term vision about tourism-driven sustainable infrastructure. That is, how do we turn tourism into a foremost driver of the sustainability, resilience, and inclusiveness agendas? And we do that by building these smart destinations. And I'm going to touch on this in much more detail as the presentation goes forward. So before we even get too deep into big data, there's plenty that we have to do in order to help the industry come back and respond to the perils of COVID-19. And in fact, we've pulled just a couple sentences from our overall policy recommendations at the end of the report we've written. It's important to say that, you know, we need the holistic accounting. We need to build up the local capacity of our destination managers. We need new blended finance for sustainable infrastructure and for the SMEs. But we also need to know how to do it. And that's what I'm going to talk about now, is how can big data help us build those smart destinations? And then how is big data going to help us achieve everything on this list, not only for the recovery from COVID-19, but to the sustainable development of the industry to perpetuity. So this is going to bring me to the second part of my presentation today, which is tourism big data and creating smart destinations. So before we can talk about where we want to go to the smart destinations, we have to better understand where we're coming from. And that's the traditional tourism statistics. And we also have to give credit where credit is due. This list of numbers basically contained on this table are responsible for helping drive the industry forward over the last 50 years to becoming the global economic juggernaut that it is. This is a list of specific airline data, hotel data, arrivals data, demographic-based market research, economic impact analysis, as well as some transportation data. And again, by using these as the North Star metrics for the industry, we see that 10.3% of global GDP and the 330 million jobs around the world supported. That being said, our traditional tourism statistics have limitations. These are considered small data in most destinations, as they're reliant mostly on the census and survey in terms of methodology for collection. Believe it or not, in most destinations, particularly in our region, this is still a heavily analog process. It's not yet digitized, meaning that these are time and resource intensive. And beyond the time and resource intensivity, they're not available on demand. There's a significant lag between the collection time, the processing time, and then ultimately the publication time to market. So to cover some of those limitations of the traditional tourism statistics, the industry has started to work with what we're going to call traditional tourism big data providers. Now, this is actually a catch-all term for many things, but being honest, when people talk about traditional tourism big data, they're really just referring to the online travel platforms. These can come in a few different categories. I've tried to break them out here, but essentially online travel refers to the platforms we use when we book our holidays, our vacation rentals, our flights, ride hailing, etc. And just to give an overview, I'm sure most people on call use at least one of these brands when booking their travel, if not for research, then the actual booking. This is an incomplete list of about 20 providers that are the prominent providers globally. But already this list represents over $100 billion of revenue per year. So that starts to give us an understanding of the true size and scope of online travel. Furthermore, over 50% of bookings around the world are now taking place online, which again, given the numbers of the industry, starts to show the true size of this data. So what are the benefits that we receive when we work with traditional tourism big data? There's the billions of data points. This can actually help us monitor demand and bookings in real time. It gives us these deep cross-border and cross-sector consumer insights that our small data cannot provide. As Mr. Butler shared at the beginning, we start to get that enhanced marketing reach and targeting, the great product development from those feedback loops of the enhanced behavior analysis of our target consumers. And then importantly, too, dispersal campaigns, which is a great tool in the toolkit of destination managers to be able to leverage these platforms and their marketing capability to entice tourists to go to new and different destinations instead of constantly concentrating in a limited number of places. Now, I'm going to say this with a smile because actually this slide represents about a quarter of the report that we wrote. And we could probably teach a semester in a university on this slide alone about the limitations and challenges of traditional tourism big data. So I'm not going to go into too much of detail on this because even though it's a focus of the report, it's not the focus of the presentation today. Suffice it to say that traditional tourism big data has its opportunities, but we have challenges. Some of them are technical in terms of the selectivity bias, the continuity, the data invisibles. Some of them are based on the skills of our destination managers or the resources in terms of cost available to our destinations. But again, I put this to show that there are limitations and challenges to using it, but it's not a focus. Instead, this is actually the focus of today's presentation. And it's this, that actually both the traditional tourism statistics and tourism big data have a primary limitation. And it's this, they have an implicit growth agenda, and that growth agenda is implicitly economic. It looks towards the economic success of the industry without wholly accounting for the environmental and social issues in the industry. So again, with the second point, they do not account for the invisible burden of tourism, which are these tourism externalities. And so in short, if our industry wants to become sustainable, it will never become a driver of sustainability if these metrics continue to be the only North Star metrics we use in destination planning. So where did I get this idea for invisible burden? It actually comes from this great report that was published in 2019 from Epler-Wood International, Cornell University, and the Travel Foundation. And I've condensed the report, but essentially the focus are these unaccounted for externalities of tourism. Basically, the unmeasured externality of tourists create hidden burdens on destinations' environments, societies, and economies. Now, these externalities are ultimately borne by the local communities where tourists operate, and therefore call to question the unquestioned belief in tourism's net benefits. I've provided here a screenshot from the report so we can start to get a sense for what are some of those unaccounted for externalities. GHG emissions, renewable energy costs, renewable water sources, and then a big oversight here, which are the social, cultural, restoration, and maintenance of a destination. As a result of this invisible burden, that same report gives us two solutions to look for to build back more sustainably. It says first, new holistic accounting systems that capture the full range of costs stemming from the growth of tourism are needed. These will, by the by, take into account the climate, the habitat, and the social costs of destinations hosting travelers and tourists. But the key thing powering the holistic accounting are new data and technology sources that are measuring resource consumption to better protect the local environment and cultural heritage to benefit those communities. As a result, then, what we've talked to and what we focused on mostly to date as an industry has been these traditional tourism statistics and the traditional tourism big data. Whereas what we're hearing in the invisible burden and other reports too, of course, is to start shifting the focus over to management. This means supplementing our traditional tourism statistics and traditional tourism big data with smart cities big data to build those holistic accounting mechanisms or enhanced metrics for sustainable outcomes to give us those smart destinations. Now, what do I mean by smart cities big data? These are the large networks of sensors used to monitor and track various municipal services, typically using IoT or Internet of Things devices. It could be mundane like car parking or noise monitoring, or more profound in this instance to things like water usage, traffic surveillance, electricity use, and air pollution. I'm going to kind of bulk teleco data under smart cities big data here because it's IoT driven, which our colleague Juan He is going to go into more detail with the next presentation about. But suffice to say that there are big benefits to using these automated sources of big data. First, they're automated or they're designed to collect the data. They're highly accurate as they show real usage in real time from what users are actually doing. And these are practical data and insights actually tied to the management of a destination. Now, what we've done at POD is we've developed, these are supposed to be green, these two, oops. We've developed a schematic here that says if a destination was actually going to be smart, what would those data flows look like and how would those impact the investment flows? So as you'll see here on the schematic, we have these one-way and also two-way data flows between our infrastructure and our private and our public sector, which are ultimately leading to enhanced investment decisions in sustainable tourism technology and infrastructure. My apologies, as these two arrows here are supposed to be green, showing that the enhanced data flows are actually giving the enhanced infrastructure investments from the public sector and the private sector. Now, the result of this then starts to answer that question I posed at the beginning of my presentation today, which are what are those fundamental goals of tourism big data? First, we begin to understand truly the value and the cost on a per tourist basis in a destination, or that invisible burden. And second, by understanding that true value and that true cost, we get to make enhanced tourism-driven sustainable infrastructure investments that are more sustainable, as well as better target our capacity development decisions and interventions for our destination managers and our trade. Okay, so go to the next slide. I understand that was very condensed and also quite theoretical. But again, I want to make sure that we're seeing it for what it is. It's not only the online platforms, but the management of tourism is also going to be dependent on these new data streams from the smart cities data and IoT data. With that in mind, though, I also want to be practical. I want to show everybody now in this third part how big data is actually being used for COVID-19 recovery, which I believe is also a focus of Juan He's presentation next. So the first is I want to share the emerging strategy that we're seeing across destinations around the world related to traditional tourism big data being used for promoting domestic tourism. We're seeing it in Macau, we're seeing it in Singapore, we're seeing it in Thailand, where the destinations are partnering with these online platforms and then also providing deals and vouchers for redemption on those platforms to get their domestic populations out and actually engaging with their tourism businesses at this time of prolonged border closures. Very interestingly as well, we're seeing a higher adoption of the destinations using the payment options for these platforms, which is very interesting, meaning that they're actually supplying the vouchers to be redeemed on a WeChat, or excuse me, on a WePay or on a GrabPay. For then the businesses who maybe were not on the online platforms before, in order to capture this domestic market, it's forcing their own digitalization. Now they have to sign up to these platforms to receive those payments. And I think Ricky Hoy from Macau is going to go into more details in the panel discussion about this. The next way that we're seeing big data assist with COVID recovery is actually helping with opening of borders and creating regional harmony. You know, pre-COVID-19, the industry was already making significant advances with the seamless travel agenda. This is the use of technology, notably biometrics, and the use of a digital identity to enable a seamless and secure end-to-end traveler journey. Now, early on in the crisis, we heard a lot about we need health passports, we need digital passports, et cetera. Since that early part of the crisis, in the first part of this year, this brand, Common Pass, this organization has sort of emerged as the leader or the winning health passport globally. This is a project that's a collaboration between an NGO called the Commons Project, backed by the Rockefeller Foundation and the World Economic Forum. Essentially, it's using blockchain and interoperable technology to securely unite airports, airlines, health authorities, immigration, and travelers. And I'm just going to show you quickly how this works. In essence, in destination or point of origin, a traveler will get their lab test for COVID or their vaccination certification. That lab result using blockchain will be sent securely to an app on their phone. They will carry that with them by way of a QR code to the different checkpoints as they travel. In October 2020, successful pilots already took place between the UK and the US and Hong Kong and Singapore. And in November, importantly, Common Pass was endorsed by the Airports Council International and the world's 3 major airline alliances, SkyTeam, Oneworld, and Star Alliance. So this is already up and running, and we're going to continue to see more of this. Finally, at the last part of my presentation today, I want to share 2 models that have emerged from different sources about reimagining the future management of the travel and tourism industry, not only through COVID-19, but also beyond. The first model I want to share is from McKinsey, and this is their establishment of their idea of a tourism nerve center. Now, they've given 4 points that they believe all destinations should be paying attention to as they try to build back through the pandemic and into the future. 2 of these, their nerve center, and then this last point, enabling a digital analytics transformation, are heavily focused on big data. This is the schematic from their article, and I've highlighted this part here that they call Industry Observatory. But if you read it and you pay attention to how they build this argument through their report, they're just talking tourism big data. Essentially, the destination needs to become the central spoke of data and analysis, particularly big data, to be able to get that information in, centralize it, analyze it, kick it out to the trade so the trade can make better decisions at this time, but also for their own policy development and governance to be able to make those better and enhanced decisions. Another model that's emerged is from the same author of the Invisible Burden report that I talked about earlier in my presentation, which is what she has called a Marshall Plan for Tourism. Can it be built? Like McKinsey, she's also advocating for a rethinking of how the destinations themselves are actually structured in terms of management, and is proffering a 4-part sustainable tourism investment hub. It proctors an SME fund, a sustainable infrastructure fund, the increased capacity building and technical assistance, but really at the heart of it in her argument is the Center for Destination Information and Technology. This is that core hub that's building towards that holistic accounting, those enhanced metrics for sustainable outcomes. But in the short term, in the COVID period, that data hub will be providing the information to get our sustainable infrastructure, our SME recovery, and our capacity building fully off the ground. So I have 15 seconds left. I'm going to move to my conclusion today. As I shared at the beginning, look, we can talk about this forever, but really our goal is not only tourism big data for marketing and product development, better leveraging of online platforms and digitalization, and it cannot only be about COVID-19 recovery. We need to start thinking not only about the marketing side, we need to springboard from that to the management side to reach our fundamental goals of tourism big data, or the role that tourism big data can be in helping us build these smart destinations. So we finally can start to understand the value and cost per tourist, that invisible burden of tourism, to ultimately give us the enhanced tourism-driven infrastructure investment and capacity development decisions. Remember, this is a long-term crisis. If we can accomplish this in and through COVID-19, then we truly stand a chance to not only revive our industry, but to turn tourism into a foremost driver of the sustainability, resilience, and inclusiveness agendas. So with that, I thank you all for your time today. I took 20 minutes and 50 seconds, not 10 seconds, my apologies. But you can email me anytime at this address if you have further questions. And I've also put a QR code for my LinkedIn. So thank you all very much for your time today. Over to you, Matthias and Dr. Park.
Thank you, Trevor. Without further any ado, can I turn to Won-hee to make the presentation?
All right. Hello, can you hear me?
Yes, we can hear you.
All right. Let me show my presentation first. All right, so good morning, good afternoon, wherever you are in the world. I am Won-hee Cho from the Economic Research and Regional Cooperation Department of ADB, and I am pleased to present to you today on how we could use big data to understand tourism sector by examining the case of Republic of Korea. I would like to say that this presentation is a joint effort between ADB and Korea Telecom, or KT in short. So first, on behalf of our colleagues from KT, let me introduce KT's tourist analysis method and tourism analysis solution. We know that reliable and timely performance analysis is essential for the tourism industry to develop further. As a result, KT has been very much focused on using mobile data to analyze tourism. So please let me present to you the results of what KT has accomplished so far. So what is the logic behind identifying tourists using mobile data? KT uses the LTE signal data for tourist analysis. Most telcos use the CDR or the call detail record data to measure the floating population. However, CDR data is only generated when a customer uses a call or sends a message. So data is generated very irregularly and there is a large gap between data points. On the other hand, LTE signal data is generated very regularly, every 5 minutes on an average, even when a mobile phone is not being used. And for this reason, LTE data is more appropriate for accurate analysis of tourist patterns. In fact, it is able to generate 7,000% more data than CDR. Then how do we know who is a tourist and how does KT identify tourists? So KT defines a signal captured around the base station at a certain time as an entire population. Then, by analyzing the pattern of the user's stay in the area, KT categorizes it as a resident or non-resident. When signals are regularly captured at a certain time zone, KT defines them as residents. On the other hand, the non-resident population is examined further in order to filter out who are the tourists. By analyzing tourist patterns, the tourist population is estimated. Among the tourist population, KT further categorizes it as domestic or foreign tourists. As for domestic tourists, they can be estimated and segmented into resident and non-resident from the entire population captured in base stations by applying statistical behavior of tourists. The criteria for defining a domestic tourist is the number of visits of visit to the tourist sites. This criteria was established after analyzing actual data. Short-term visit foreigners can be identified from KT's roaming data. The criteria for defining foreign tourists is the length of tourist visits. And according to roaming data, foreign tourists visiting Korea are expected to stay a maximum of 15 days. So we use 15 days as a criteria to identify tourists. In general, one's carrier's data does not cover the entire population. Therefore, KT applies statistical techniques to calculate the overall number of tourists. And KT attempts to build a representative population out of the sample collected. In this case of domestic tourists, it is calculated by considering the market share of telcos. In the case of foreign, estimated by the statistics of entry and departure record by countries. In terms of accuracy, through the verification processes, domestic and foreign tourist data estimations result 95% and 75% respectively. Next, I will introduce the tourism analysis solution KT has created. So the Travel Intelligence Platform, or the TRIP, is a platform that provides tourism statistics and tourism analysis using mobile and credit card data. Tourism statistics include detailed analysis of tourist visits, tourist characteristics, and length of visit by tourist site and festival period. Tourism analysis provide information by comparing the competitiveness of tourist sites in the 5 areas: see, eat, buy, stay, and play. And last but not the least, tourism consulting supports local governments to address top challenges through reliable tourism statistics and analysis. For the following slides, I will briefly introduce the main features of TRIP. So this is the main page of TRIP. So when you enter the URL in your browser, this is what you'll be seeing. At the moment, unfortunately, the website is only supported in the Korean language. Most data in the platform are updated on a weekly basis. Here, you may choose to look at data on a weekly or a monthly basis. Here, let's examine the trends for the week of November 30 to December 6. When you select an area of interest, you will be able to identify overall status of tourists. So today, let's check on one of the districts in the Seoul metropolitan city. So here I click Seoul City, then select Junggu District. It's one of the districts in the city. On the right side of the map, we'd be able to see the week-on-week changes in the number of visitors, year-on-year changes, and the breakdown on the number of visitors for the week that we're examining. And we can also see the rankings under different categories. Let's check the tourist spot ranking. So in the district of Junggu, Myeongdong emerged as the #1 tourist spot. So I think for those who have visited Seoul, I'm sure you might have gone to this area at least once during your trip. So this is one of the most popular tourist destinations in Seoul, especially for foreign visitors for shopping or for food. And when I click this location, you'll be able to see a detailed analysis result. The size and characteristics of tourists can be identified by specific tourist sites. So here we see that people in their 20s like to visit Myeongdong the most between 2 p.m. to 6 p.m. Most people come from another district of Seoul called Seongbu. Then majority of the people remain in the same district, Junggu district, after visiting Myeongdong. Here, you can also see the inflow and outflow into the certain area to identify movement patterns. So in this case, we are studying Myeongdong. In terms of domestic tourists, we can identify their gender, age, and place of residence. On the other hand, for foreign visitors, we can identify their nationality. So in this case, during 2 weeks ago, 35.16% of foreign visitors were from China. But then again, these are data from the week of November 30 to December 6, wherein the absolute number of tourists are very low at 3,000 visitors only. Aside from seeing data in a tabular form, TRIP also supports the GIS, so we could check travel patterns of tourists using the map. Here, I can choose the point of interest and period, then click to see inflow or outflow of the visitors. In this case, let's select Myeongdong again as our destination and check the movement patterns of domestic tourists. Here, we try to answer the question, where did domestic visitors come from to visit Myeongdong in the whole month of October 2020? So we see that most visitors are from different districts around Seoul, except one that you see under, the one in blue, that is the Gyeonggi province, which is still pretty near from Seoul, maybe around 40 to 50 minutes by car. So we can see that for the month of October, most people came from nearby areas. On the other hand, let's check the outflow. So where did domestic visitors go to after visiting Myeongdong? So here again, lots of people, majority of the visitors remained in the same city of Seoul and actually remained at the district that Myeongdong is in. So 31.3% remained at the Junggu district of Seoul. Here are some examples on how this solution has been used in Korea. First, KT and the Korea Tourism Organization, or the KTO, made an agreement to invigorate domestic tourism industry. And for 5 years, KT has analyzed the trend of domestic and foreign travelers, and KTO has been integrating the results to its tourism policies. The second case is analysis of local tourist spot. For example, there was a project to increase the number of tourists in Gwangmyeong Cave, a tourist site in Korea. Using KT Tourism Analysis Solution, KT has identified routes to nearby tourist areas and reorganized bus routes that link the spots. And here are some examples on how the solution has been used to analyze domestic tourism in Korea. And this is a pre-existing report done by the KTO using KT's data in analyzing the domestic tourism market amid COVID-19. So here, this is a presentation for the period January 27 to November 15. Overall, we see a negative relationship between confirmed cases and the number of visitors. So when new cases are high, people are reluctant to travel around. Korea has had 2 COVID-19 waves so far, although at the current time, we are on our 3rd wave, unfortunately. But aside from these times when the country experienced spikes in the COVID cases, the government was able to contain the spread of the virus relatively well. And there have been 2 instances wherein we observed a positive year-on-year change in terms of the number of visitors throughout the period. So one is week 17, that's April 27 to May 3. And the second one is week 39, September 28 to October 4. So for For the week 17, this was the so-called Golden Week of Korea, one of the biggest holidays in the country. And the week 39, wherein it experienced a 13% year-on-year change. This was Chuseok, or the Korean Thanksgiving Day. This is usually when families travel to their provinces or hometowns for the week, or the weekend at least. So in both holidays, Koreans would usually travel abroad, but given the ongoing pandemic and travel restrictions, people remained in the country. And here we see visitor and expenditure trends after the outbreak. Overall, of course, on the leftmost, we see the nationwide average for the period under study. Then we see data for all 17 administrative districts of Korea. On average, visitors and spending dropped 19% and 27% respectively. And most impact on the number of visitors was felt by Seoul with a drop of 29%, while the most impact in terms of expenditure was experienced by Incheon by 49%. And all 17 administrative districts experienced contraction, both in terms of visitors and expenditure, but this experience was less severe in provincial areas. So these are the 7 provinces enclosed in the orange box. Next, let's dive into the expenditure data to see how people's spending patterns have changed ever since the COVID-19 outbreak in the country. This is a nationwide data, again, for the same period, and the BC credit card data was used to extract consumption data. All tourism businesses experienced negative growth except golf course and rent car businesses. So golf course grew by 17%, while rent car businesses grew by 62%, which is pretty impressive. But then travel agencies and duty-free shops are experiencing the sharpest decline. So overall, tourism-related industries in Korea were no exceptions in experiencing the negative effects brought by the pandemic. So yeah, with that, I end my presentation for today. And thank you so much for your kind attention.
Thank you so much, Wanhee and Trevor, for your excellent presentations. It was really insightful to see what can be done with big data. Let me now go to the panel discussion. And I have the great honor to welcome a very distinguished panel today. Let me introduce first to you the 3 panelists. We have first Ms. Sandra Carvalho. Sandra is the Chief of Tourism Market Intelligence and Competitiveness at the World Tourism Organization since June 2018. Before that, she was the Chief of Communications and Publications, as well as Deputy Chief at UNWTO's Market Trends, Competitiveness and Trade in the Tourism Services Department. Prior to joining the UNWTO in 2003, Sandra worked for the Portuguese National Tourist Office in Lisbon. Sandra has a degree in international relations by the Universidade Técnica de Lisboa and a postgraduate degree in marketing by the Universidade Complutense de Madrid. Second, Mr. Mario Hardy. Mario is the CEO of the Pacific Asia Travel Association, PATA, since November 2014. PATA is a not-for-profit membership association that catalyzes on responsible development of travel and tourism within the Asia-Pacific region. Mario is the past chairman of the Board of Trustees of the PATA Foundation. Mario has over 30 years of experience in specialized aviation businesses focusing on data analytics and technology, coupled with several corporate leadership capacities, and he currently serves on various advisory boards. Mario has also received an honorary doctorate of letters from Kampilana University in 2016 for his philanthropic work in Cambodia. And third, Mr. Ricky Hoy. Ricky has been the Deputy Director of the Macau Government Tourist Office, MGTO, since 2018. He supervises the Organizational Planning and Development Department, as well as the Tourism Product and Events Department. He joined MGTO in 1990 and served as head of the licensing division from April 2009 to March 2015, and then as head of the Organizational Planning and Development Department. Ricky holds a Bachelor of Business Administration degree in Business Information Systems from the Macau University of Science and Technology. So a very warm welcome to you all. Let me start with Sandra. In the presentation that we have just seen by Trevor, we heard that there are a lot of difference between traditional statistics and big data. My question to you is, how do you see these two come together? And let's assume a government doesn't have enough money to really fully developing one of those. What should they do first? First, aim for the traditional statistics or already start developing the big data? Over to you, Sandra.
Thank you very much, Matthias. Good afternoon, everyone, and good morning, depending on where you see us today. And thank you to Trevor and Wanti for the great presentations that they just shared. I would start by saying that one should never eliminate the priority of the other. Traditional statistics have a concept of reliability and comparability that are critical for policy, and big data, which has emerged in recent years, should be and should work as a complement to that traditional statistics. I'll give you an example from our side at the World Tourism Organization. We work with governments around the world to improve their statistical capabilities, but at the same time, we work to make sure that they can leverage big data into either improving that traditional statistics in terms of time availability, in terms of comparability as well. But at the same time, for example, domestic tourism that has now been one of the priorities and probably will be in the year to come, is one of the areas that traditional statistics needs to be improved because there's still huge gaps. So working with big data can actually complement that information, as we have seen in the fantastic presentation from Korea, as long as we define the methodology very clearly. How do we identify a resident and a tourist within the big data? How can we actually match the two to make sure that they're complement? And I think there's also an important point in what you were mentioning is the holistic approach to destination management. Many of the data, or either big data or statistics that we need, might not be tourism specifically. We were just hearing in the presentation by Trevor the issue of resources use. Those are data often that are also available in other sources. So for tourism to work in an holistic approach, it's key to really have the full picture of the impact that we want to know about tourism in a destination.
Thank you very much, Sandra. And so let's assume the government wants to build up a market intelligence system to basically capture these different sources of data and intelligence. In your opinion, what does it take to build up such a market intelligence system, and at the national level, but also at the local level?
Well, I think the first one is putting it as a priority. I think it's very important that either if you're a national government or a local government, that measuring is one of your priorities. If that doesn't happen from the start, then it's not going to translate into actions. The second one, I would say, is a cross-cutting approach to that market intelligence system or travel system, as we have seen in the presentation from Korea, which is you need to bring all the players together, the public sector, the private sector at national and local level, but also the different administrations. You need to bring the transport ministry together, you need to bring finance, you need to bring foreign affairs, because tourism penetrates in each of these areas. So a lot of the data that you actually need probably sometimes is already there. You just need to identify it. I would say the third point is that you define your KPIs very, very strongly and very clearly. If you don't know what you want to measure from the start, then you have to implement such a system. And the fourth point, I would say, is then go into identifying the available sources, identifying the resources that you need, not only the technical resources, but human resources. I think in the beginning, there was a comment that the tourism industry is probably still behind in some of these areas compared to other sectors. And I think we need to invest in talent. We need to invest in training. In many destinations, there are a lack of human resources who are capable of managing and developing the systems. And the last point I think it's very important is to make sure that national and local level are coordinated so that there's no duplication of efforts and that the learnings can be used by everyone. Sometimes there are obviously indicators which you will have available at local level that you don't have at national and vice versa. But it's very important that can be a system of coordination. As Mr. Butler mentioned in the beginning, for example, the UNWTO network of sustainable tourism observatories looks into the different pillars, economic, social, and environmental, of the impact of tourism. And there are many, many examples of destinations who are using big data to actually measure such impact. And the last point I would say is the importance of having actionable insights, because you can have a lot of data, you can have a lot of information, but if you don't transform those into policy or into action, then it's just investing in a system. I'd like to share one of the examples of our observatories, which is the Buenos Aires, who's built a very good market intelligence system. And for example, they identified the failures, that the comments from the users in terms of accommodation. And most of the comments were very much in line with the need for refurbishment of hotels, which led into the opening by the Buenos Aires government of a specific line of financing for hotels refurbishment. So I think it's important that we don't miss the point of insights need to be used for a specific policy objective. So with that, I would leave it here. Thank you, Matthias.
Thank you very much, Sandra. So let me now turn to Mario. And just to let you know, the audience can always ask questions. Please either raise your hand or put your question in the chat box, and then I will ask questions to our panel. Mario, in our forthcoming report, it is stated that it's important to establish an environment that incentivizes the private sector to work with the public and create a win-win scenario. And I know it's a tricky question on how to best do that, but I would like to pick your brain and tell us a little bit more how these PPPs can happen and what are the possible risks involved in those PPPs. Mario.
Sure. Thank you, Matthias. Probably the best way to answer this question is by actually giving you an example of what happens when you don't. So this is a real case story, but I will keep the destination anonymous, although I think some of you might actually guess which one it is. So several years ago, one destination was the victim of their own success. They were so good at promoting the destination that they actually ended up doubling their number of tourists at the destinations itself in a very short time space. And they woke up one morning and the sewage was actually overflowing into the street. The electricity was cutting down all the time. They ran out of water, and they actually had aircraft parked on the ground with no rooms available for actually putting these tourists in because they were all sold out. So the destination was literally sold out. What happened is the destination was really successful at developing a very good marketing campaign and promoting themselves and etc. But never actually shared this plan with the other divisions of the government. They never informed the people that managing the infrastructure, managing waste management, managing the electricity, energy, and water consumption, and all of this, of their plan that actually if should they be successful, the population on the island, if you account for the tourists, would double, and therefore able to manage the capacity during that period of time. So that's what happened when actually the private sector or the public sector goes in and do something without actually talking to the other relevant divisions and departments. The partnership is critical. And this could have easily happened also where the private sector could have gone on and actually do a really good job at marketing themselves without necessarily involving the government. So the situation is not unique, either public or private. It happens in both ways. So there's just one example out of many where collaboration is absolutely necessary. I've also seen the opposite, where the lack of success was the fact that actually there were no collaborations between private and public, because one end was marketing something, the other was marketing something under destination, and ended up with conflicting messages into the marketplace, where the traveler what they can find with destination and end up going somewhere else. So the collaboration is absolutely critical. And the collaboration is not only between public and private. I would say also collaboration is also critical between government departments themselves. As the example I gave you before, where there was a lack of communication with other divisions of the department. We at PATA were invited a few years ago, two years ago, to do an assessment of developing tourism in a, I would say, practically virgin destination, where the number of tourists at the destination on the island was only 899 tourists per year. It's a fantastic opportunity for someone to look at developing tourism from essentially from scratch, from nothing, and how you can actually develop sustainably over a period of time and responsibly. But in that assessment, we had to do all the things I just talked about, understanding what is the water consumptions and water available on the island, what is the energy consumption available on the island, what is actually the situation in terms of waste management, and what does this nation wants to be known for? What type of tourists do you want? How many can you accommodate on the island? What is your maximum capacity? What is the ideal capacity for the destination? But this would only been possible by having conversations with all parts of the government, as well as all the different sectors within the private sectors of the hospitality, the transportations, the tourism activities, and developing sustainable products. So I've said it since the day I joined PATA that it is critical that public and private partnership really work hand in hand in developing a destination responsibly and sustainably.
Thank you very much, Mario. You just mentioned the environment and these negative externalities from tourism. So we also heard that big data comes from the tourism sector itself, but when it comes to those externalities, how can we actually leverage big data to better measure those? That would be interesting to know. Mario, over to you.
Sure. Sandra mentioned it a little bit before too, that many of these data sets are actually already available within the governments. They're just not available to tourism, but they're available in other parts of the government. The CO2 emission, for example, the amount of waste being generated, the energy consumptions, the water consumption, the economic impact, the job impact also, all of those needs to be actually taken account when you look at your tourism policies for the long term and your tourism development. It's not only the arrivals and the spending data, which are critical and need to continue to be measured, but you also need to include other data sets that are available within your governments. They may not be available to your department at the moment. And that's a question of sometimes just reaching out to other divisions of the governments or working to your ministry more closely and developing better relationships with other divisions of the government to develop a central data set that can be used and pulled from other parts. And we'll hear from Ricky later on to how Macau is doing it. And they have a really good system and how they actually aggregating data from other divisions of the government to make their strategy better moving forward.
Thank you. So with that, let me turn to Ricky. Ricky, you have prepared a short presentation that showcases what you're currently doing with big data. So the floor is yours for 5-10 minutes. Ricky. You're muted, Ricky. Ricky, you're muted. Ricky, you have to unmute. We can't hear you.
Hello?
Yes, now it's good.
Yeah, okay. Good morning and good afternoon, everyone. This is Ricky from the Macau Government Tourism Office. I'm very happy to be invited to the webinar and to talk about the big data and the tourism recovery. I have just prepared a small presentation, so we'll show you the presentation and then we'll come back for the discussion. For those who are not very familiar with Macau, probably when we talk about Macau, the first thing you can think of maybe is the casino. Yes, indeed, Macau was somebody called Macau the Oriental Monte Carlo. But actually, though we are a very small city, but we are a tourism destination with many different kind of entertainment. For example, the world-class hotels. We are also inscribed on the UNESCO Heritage Site since 2005, and in 2017 we become a member of the UNESCO Creative City Network. We are the City of Gastronomy member. Even though the big portion of the government income is still from the gaming side, but yes, so we will see the tourism industry is a very important economic pillar of Macau. During the past months, the pandemic, yeah, gave a very severe hit to Macau. But I think the Macau government is doing quite a good job to fight the COVID-19 pandemic. So far, we have only 46 confirmed COVID-19 cases, and the last case happened on 25th of June. That means we are almost more than 5 months, we don't have any COVID-19 case here in Macau. When our city becomes safe, we plan to launch some measure to help the recovery of the tourism sector. One measure that I can share with you is what we call the Macau Radical e-coupon platform. Of course, the objective is to stimulate the spending on the tourism industry and to support the local economy. We are offering this platform to the local shops free of charge, and the shops, they are free to give any discount in whatever format they think appropriate. So far, we have run the platform for more than 6 months, and now we have already the 670 merchants on the platform, and the discounted items are almost 2,000, and the discount coupon downloaded by the tourists and the local people has more than 200,000. So why I mentioned this platform here, what does it do with the big data? I would say traditionally we will distribute the coupon in print format, in paper coupon. For example, at the entry point, at the hotel, at the restaurant, etc., etc. But now this time we use the e-coupon format. So what is the advantage of using the e-coupon? This is the most advantage is we can easily collect information and data of what the result of the discount coupon. With the traditionally with the with the paper coupon, it's very difficult to collect data of how the coupons are distributed, how they are used. But with this e-coupon platform, we can at any time easily collect information and the situation of the coupons. For example, we can easily count how many coupons are downloaded by the tourists, in what category they are in what category they are, and how they are used, etc., etc. Yes, we are still running the platform. We don't have. We are now still in the data capturing stage. We don't have much actual usage of big data from this platform yet, but we know that this platform will help us to plan for the next stage of the strategy. For example, one objective of our strategy is prolong the length of stay of the tourists. So from this preliminary result we collect, we can say the download coupon in the accommodation category is about 40%, but the discount item we offer are just only 12%. So with this kind of information, we can adjust our measure in the next phase. For example, the government may subsidize more on the hotel product so as to attract more tourists who can stay here in Macau for one more night. Another item that I would like to share with you is how we use big data to enhance the visitors' travel experience. When talking about this item, I have to mention that since December 2019, the Macau government already launched an open data platform. This is what we call a smart city project, cooperate with the Alibaba Cloud of mainland China. In this platform, many government bureaus, they contribute their data to this platform, and these data are free to be used by the public. Of course, this open data creates many value in different aspects. But one point I would like to highlight is with the open data platform, it turns to make some new product or service, it becomes possible. One application that I would like to share with you is the Smart Trip Planner. This is also a cooperation of the Macau government and the Alibaba Group. The Trip Planner, it applies the AI technologies, and it uses the data in the open data platform that I just mentioned so that we can suggest an itinerary for the tourist. And of course, at the same time, when we suggest an itinerary for the tourist, MGTO is able to collect the user behavior from the trip planner, and then with this data, with this feedback data, is very good for us to have an in-depth analysis at the later stage. I just stumped several screen snapshots from the trip planner to share with you so that you can have a more concrete idea for how the trip planner is doing. This trip planner was launched 2 weeks ago. It's a very new system, and sorry that we only have a Chinese version now, but the English version will be coming very soon. So at the very beginning, we will ask the user how many days they want to stay here in Macau and what is his or her interesting point. For example, he wants to visit the cultural sites, or they want to have a relaxed trip to enjoy the local food here in Macau. And then based on the interests of the users, the trip planner will recommend, we think this is the most ideal trip. But of course, the user can always do some customization of the trip. And during the trip, when they turn on the trip planner again, we will always promote the interested POIs in neighboring areas. This could be a restaurant, can be a museum, or can be a exhibition houses. When the user click on one location, for example, a museum, of course, the trip planner will give them some basic description of the museum, like the operation hours, some photos, something like that. Because the trip planner is connected to the database, so we can always have the latest news to the user. For example, the museum, due to a emergency maintenance, the museum may be closed today. This kind of latest news will be sent to the user. And again, because the trip planner is linked to the database, we can even offer some real-time data to the user. For example, when the user moves from one location to the other, the trip planner will recommend the bus route to him. And because all the public buses here in Macau are already equipped with the GPS system, so exactly we have the real-time data of where the buses is. So in this case, we can also advise the user the arrival time of the next bus, and so that they can have a better planning of the time and go to the bus stop on time. I think this is the end of my presentation. Just to conclude, sorry that we don't have much concrete cases of using big data to help the tourism recovery, but just like the speakers in the previous section say, we all believe big data will be a very good tools, and they can give a very useful contribution to the future development of the tourism industry. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Ricky. Very interesting presentation, and I think Macau is really at the forefront of this development. Let me just ask you two questions. The first one is about data privacy, because you said that you basically can follow these tourists around the city. So of course, this raises questions about data privacy. So how does Macau ensure data privacy?
Yes. We do have our law to regulate the data privacy. In 2005, what we call the Personal Data Protection Law came into enforcement in 2005. Since Macau was a Portuguese colony, this Personal Data Protection Law was originated from the European legislation system, and I will say it has a very strict regulation on using the personal data and very strict regulator on the data privacy. For example, take back the trip planner. When the user launched the trip planner, we have to ask for their consent that we collect their personal data. If they don't give the consent, we won't do any collection of data. And even they do the consent, we can collect their data. We have to, by the law, by this regulation, we have to take out all personal data. For example, when the user is using a website to run the trip planner, we have to take out the IP address. If he is using the mobile phone, we have to take out the mobile number. We have to take out the mail address code, so that, which means we cannot collect any identification tag from the data. And this is, I think this is a very this is a very good protection of data privacy.
Okay, excellent. Another question that I have is about your collaboration with Alibaba Cloud, because I think other governments also would like to engage more with the private sector. So what has your experience been when working with the private sector? What have been some of the challenges that you were facing?
Yes, here in Macau, when we talk about cooperation with the private sector, usually we will face two extreme cases. One, on the one hand, for those integrated resource, for example, the Sands Group, for example, the wind, because this kind of what we call the international enterprise, usually they will have sufficient support to the Macau to the government measure. So the cooperation with this kind of big enterprise, the cooperation will be very smooth. But on the other hand, when dealing with the SMEs, this will bring in quite a lot of, I won't say problem, but quite a lot of barriers to overcome. For example, let's get back to the big data, because we understand when talking about big data, usually it all involves the technology, right? So here, for this kind of project, of course, the SME has to install extra equipment. Otherwise, they won't be able to use any new technology. And investment, of course, is one thing we have to consider. And the second thing is the training. We have to provide sufficient training to the shop's employees so that they know how to operate those kind of equipment. And another very particular case here in Macau is many traditional shops are still owned and operated by some aged people. These kind of people, they used it to run the business in their own way. And I would say they don't have very high intention of using technologies. This is also another challenge that we are facing.
That's very interesting. This question of inclusion, also how to make sure that everybody can benefit from the intelligence that you generate through big data. We have about 10 minutes left for questions, so please feel free to raise your hand or put the question in the chat box. Otherwise, I would like to go back to Sandra. I think this question about inclusive usage of big data is an important one. What's your view on that, Sandra, on the inclusiveness of big data?
Well, I think it comes to what I was mentioning before in terms of resources. I think it's very important that there is increased collaboration at national level, because you will have destinations which have the capability, either financial or human, to develop it, and others who don't. So I think there's an important role to be played by the national governments to ensure that there's a national, I would say, more than big data, I would say a truly measurement-oriented policy that can either include big data or can include traditional statistics. I think, and I always insist on this, I think management of tourism, because of the different impact it has on different levels, is so cross-cutting that if you don't have an holistic national approach, it's going to be very difficult. But at the same time, it's very good to see some of the destinations who are leading that can also help others. And I think for that, you need to have a strong public-public collaboration, as it was mentioned.
And let me go to Mario. Mario, just again about this collaboration with the private sector, because also in ERCD, we have approached the private sector and tried to get some data from them, but we didn't find this collaboration very straightforward, because of course a lot of these data providers, for them it's their core business. They're not always willing to easily share even a small part of their data. So what is your advice to governments to approach the private sector and to actually start a collaboration with them? Mario, over to you.
Sorry, excuse me one second. Issue the internet. One moment.
No problem.
Yes.
Yes, we can hear you.
Okay, good. Sorry, I'm having issues with internet, so I just switched to 4G. Yeah, I can definitely understand what you're saying. I was one of them before, one of those companies who process data and who government approach to get access to freely to the information, and the answer is yes, if you have money, because we're a commercial entity, and therefore the data we aggregate. I mean, just to give you an idea, to aggregate the data, we were processing the annual cost, operational cost of aggregating this information was in excess of $20 million. So you can imagine that actually we also, as a business, as a corporation, we also have to recoup our own costs, and obviously our shareholders expect to see some returns at the end of the day. However, I believe there are actually ways to work with many of these private sector organizations, and maybe in different ways in collaborating. Many of them are also equally interested in finding alternative additional customers within our sectors, and in ways of doing partnership, introductions, and helping them to grow their business in a different way. With a limited access where the information is used for maybe internally and not distributed externally. We at PATA have formed some of these partnerships with some organizations where we do have access to the information to help us, guide us, inform our members to make better decisions moving forward. But we do not have the right to actually share that information, the detail of it, with the members, because if they want to, they can go and purchase it and do their own analysis. So I think there's ways to collaborate. You have to be creative in your approach and be flexible in the way you work with them. But I'm sure Sandra has got similar experience also. I see her nodding, and I know that her and I have had similar experience with private partners too. So.
Sandra, would like to add something, or?
Yeah, no, I think that's a very important point. I think there's two big issues here. I think there's, the concept of big data for good, I would say. And there's been an interesting discussion in some destinations when the over-tourism issue rose, which is, do public entities have the right to at least have a minimum data with no cost, because it is for public sector management. And there are actually destinations even thinking about regulating that. So I think, it's an interesting discussion. The other point is what Mario mentioned, obviously making sure that that data is collected, processed, and intelligibly available. It's a huge cost. So I think partnerships are the key. But I think for destinations as well, there's maybe an opportunity for bigger collaboration, maybe at a regional level, maybe at, national different DMOs coming together to reduce those costs. Because unfortunately, I think often the negotiations are very on a one-to-one basis. And if maybe you have a pool of destinations coming together, maybe the conditions can be better as well. So I think there's different ways to approach it. And as Mario said as well, you have different layers of information. For example, we're now partnering with several companies, and we have a UNWTO recovery tracker tool in our website, which is free access to everyone, where you can have information for in terms of occupancy rates, trends in hotel searches, in hotel bookings, in airline capacities, but you have that at a regional or sub-regional level. You don't have it at destination. So I think there's different layers of information which can also be useful.
Thank you very much, Sandra. We have one question that was put in a chat box. The question is, do you see any difference of tourism intelligence adoption between established or major tourism markets and emerging economies? How policymakers and market players are ready for implementation of big data in tourism? So I think the question is about, do we see difference in terms of the usage of big data across countries? Who would like to take that question? Yeah. Maybe Sandra or Mario?
Sure, I can start. Sandra, I'm sure can add later on. There is a huge difference. There's a difference in terms of the capability, the skill set that are actually available in the respective destination management, in understanding how to interpret the information and how to actually use information. But there's also a huge gap in terms of the finances, the money available to have the right tools to be able to process that information in a way that actually helps make better decisions. I've seen both ends. I've seen destinations such as Macau with Ricky, or Singapore, or Hong Kong, who've got a very sophisticated platform. I've got data scientists working for the destination. I've got really fascinating tools, as we've seen also with Korea, to help to guide them make these decisions. And they've been trained, they've got the right individuals, they have the right tool sets to help them. And I've seen the completely opposite of this, the other extreme, where someone's got a really 10-year-old laptop trying to process something on an Excel sheet and get data cards from the immigration office on sometime twice a year, and have thousands and thousands to process manually, and we'll go to it, and then you will receive the data a year later. So you've got the two extreme here in terms of the capabilities of the different destinations. And I think the emerging destinations or the smaller ones, or the one who really need some help at the moment, to give them the proper tools, the proper training to help them, to elevate them to a better standard moving forward.
Very good. Sandra, you would like to add something on that?
Yeah. Thank you, Matthias. Thank you, Mario. I think I would add 2 points. One, reinforcing what Mario was saying, the need to support those less resource destinations. And I think this is the fantastic platform to think about how in step maybe we can help those destinations in 2 ways. One, make it sustainable also. And this comes to the human resources point and the technological point, because you can develop fantastic systems with emerging destinations, but they need to be able to sustain them in the future. So we need to be able to train people to identify talent, and that talent sometimes is very expensive. And also tourism needs to be an attractive field to work in compared to others for data scientists. And I think this is a very key point for us. And the second one is also the opportunity to leverage country-to-country collaboration. So for those countries which are more advanced, as Mario mentioned, Singapore or Macau or Korea, to actually also think about collaboration and cooperation in technical assistance in this area. I think often technical assistance has been implemented in many other areas, and this is probably a new one that we need to think about as well. So I think there's a huge opportunity to learn from each other and to support each other here.
Thank you very much. We have about 2-3 minutes left. Are there any questions from the floor? Otherwise, I will maybe ask one last question to the 3 panelists, a very short one. Since the 3 of you are at the pulse of the tourism sector, and you've been looking into a lot of data, what's actually your outlook for the tourism sector for 2021, just in 30 seconds? Maybe I start with Sandra again.
That's the most challenging question of the last 1 hour and a half. 30 seconds. I think obviously the news of the vaccine has to be a game changer, and I think we need to now see the implementation of the vaccination. I would say we still have at least another challenging year ahead, and I think we need to be prepared for that. But I think if you look back 6 months ago, then we're more positive than we were. That said, I think the sector is still in very, very challenging moments. It needs higher support to navigate until we're back into a level that was the pre-pandemic level. And from our side at UNWTO, we still see that we need at least 2.5 years to 3 years to actually be there. And we need to support the sector as we go through. I think it's very important, and we often reinforce that we need bigger cooperation between governments in terms of travel restrictions, because this is the biggest challenge. We see when travel restrictions are addressed that the demand is there, people want to travel, but we need to achieve that. And I think we cannot forget, going through the vaccination, that we need to implement the systems to manage the information on vaccinated travelers now, because otherwise in a year time, where a big part of the population might be already vaccinated, the systems will not be in place. So I think it's a moment to step up that international and regional collaboration.
Thank you very much, Sandra. Ricky?
Yes.
Your outlook for next year?
When looking at 2021, I think it will still be a very difficult year, but we all should look at the bright side of it. Here in Macau, I think we are a little lucky. Why I say that? Because mainland China is our major source market, And we all know China, they have a very good control of the pandemic situation there. And next year, we all have to work hard and harder, but we all we are very optimistic that more tourists from mainland China will come to Macau, and I hope our tourism situation will have a big recovery in the next year. Thank you.
Thank you, Ricky. Mario?
I'll keep it short. A very slow and gradual recovery, but some glimpse of hope that things will get better, but it will take time.
Thank you very much. Thank you so much to all the panelists. I think we had a very insightful and interesting discussion, and that covered many topics within this big data and tourism area. That brings me to the end of this webinar. Thanks so much for participating. And just on one last point on big data and tourism, we're gonna all see one tourist coming to many of our houses very soon, namely Santa Claus. And so somehow he makes very good use of big data because all the presents are always distributed on time. With this, I would like to conclude and finish this RCI pod. Thanks so much for participating. It's the last RCI pod of this year. Thanks so much for listening in to the other RCI pods as well. We're going to be back next year. Until then, I wish you a happy Christmas break and an excellent start into 2021. Goodbye to you all. Bye-bye. Thank you very much for participating.
Take care. Happy holidays.
Happy holidays.